Imagine waking up to the sound of sirens tearing through the sky. You have exactly 90 seconds to decide who lives and who dies, your 5-year-old son or your 70-year-old mother. It's not a philosophical dilemma. It's a real choice millions made. When bomb shelters only had room for half the people, if you think you'd survive World War II, wait until you learn that dying in an explosion was considered lucky, because what really killed wasn't the bombs, it was something much worse. Something that's in your kitchen right now, but back then was worth more than gold. And when you find out what that is, you'll understand why 95% of people today wouldn't last a week in that hell. But before I reveal this deadly secret, you need to understand what it was like to wake up on an ordinary morning in 1939 with no notifications on your phone, no breaking news alerts, just the birdsong and the smell of fresh bread from the corner bakery. Sounds peaceful, doesn't it? It was a trap, because this normality was about to turn into the greatest nightmare in human history. And people had no idea. See, in 1939, Warsaw had electric trams, cinemas showing Hollywood films, cafes serving apple strudel. Berlin had the best opera house in the world. Paris was, well, Paris. People went to work in suits, children played in the squares, housewives shopped at the market. Now here's the terrifying detail. 80% of everything these cities consumed came from abroad. 80%. Berlin's bread depended on wheat from Ukraine. Paris's meat came from Argentina. The coal that heated London crossed the English Channel. Every single day. It was a house of cards waiting for the first breeze. People lived in a bubble of comfort that seemed indestructible. Electricity, running water, public transportation, running like a Swiss clock, hospitals with trained doctors, pharmacies with imported medicines, markets with fruit from 3 different continents. But here's the crucial point. All of this depended on a word that no one valued: logistics. Trains needed to run, ships needed to dock, trucks needed to run. All it took was to cut one of these lines, and the entire city would starve to death within 72 hours. And do you know what the biggest illusion of all was? People thought the war would be like the last one. A few months in the trenches, a peace, treaty, normal life again. The newspapers said it would be a quick and clean war. Experts assured that the modern economy couldn't withstand more than 6 months of conflict. Even the most pessimistic Jewish families saved food for 3 months. 3 months! The war would last 6 years. Nobody, and when I say nobody, I mean nobody. I imagined that within a few months people would be fighting over potato peelings in the trash, that they would trade wedding rings for a bag of flour. That salt, that white powder you have in your kitchen right now, would become more valuable than jewelry. Because World War II wasn't just about armies facing off, it was about systematically destroying everything that made civilized life possible. And this began the very moment the first bombs severed the first train lines. September 1st, 1939, 4:45. Himana Schutz was preparing breakfast for her 2 children in Berlin when she heard a sound she would never forget. It wasn't thunder, it was the future arriving. The sirens began low, almost timidly. Then they turned into a bone-piercing mechanical howl. Anna had exactly 4 minutes to gather 5-year-old Klaus, 3-year-old Lel, documents and water, and descend 7 floors to the basement. 4 minutes to choose between the family photo album or an extra blanket. She chose the blanket. It was the right decision. The album wouldn't keep her children warm when winter arrived. But look, the first bombing wasn't the worst. The worst was discovering that it would become routine 3 times a night, sometimes 5. The human body simply wasn't designed to wake up in panic so many times. After a week, people were collapsing from exhaustion in the stairwells. And then came the cruel mathematics of modern warfare. In 24 hours, just 24 hours, 2 million people in Warsaw lost their homes. It's not an exaggeration. 2 million. Suddenly, an entire city needed to find somewhere to sleep, something to eat, and a place to defecate. Train stations became camps, parks filled with makeshift tents. Middle-class families who once drank tea from English china now fought over a piece of land in an abandoned school. But here's what no one tells you about bombings. It's not the explosion that kills most, it's what comes after. Burst gas pipes, water contaminated with sewage, Hospitals overwhelmed with no medicine, a simple case of diarrhea, something you can cure with a pill today, could kill within 3 days. Anna discovered this when Klaus started vomiting. The nearest hospital had been hit. The second had 400 people waiting in line. She walked 11 kilometers carrying her son until she found a nurse who told her the truth. Boil the water with salt. Okay, that's all we have. The transformation was brutal and instantaneous. Teachers became trench diggers, pianists carried stretchers, housewives like Anna learned to differentiate the sound of a bomb falling near or far through the floodplain. 2. Higher tones meant run, 1 lower tone. You had 15 seconds. Children were the quickest to adapt, and it was terrifying. Isel learned to sleep with explosions before learning the alphabet. Klaus played bombing with chunks of concrete. An entire generation grew up thinking sirens were as natural as rain. The social fabric crumbled within weeks. Neighbors who shared dinner began to snitch on each other for an extra piece of bread. Respected teachers stole from the dead. Doctors chose to save patients based on who could pay. And the most frightening statistic: in the first 6 months of war, more civilians died from stress, exhaustion, and disease than from bombs. The human body simply collapsed when subjected to constant terror, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared people for what was to come, because the bombs were just the appetizer. The main course would be served in silence, without sirens, without warnings, and would kill more people than all the bombs of the war combined. It was salt. That's right. You heard it right there in your kitchen. The salt you use without thinking. The salt that costs pennies. In 1942, a Dutch family traded a 3-generation Steinway piano for 2 kilos of rock salt, and it was considered a good deal, but it wasn't just the salt. I'll reveal the numbers that will make you rethink everything. The rationing system allowed 1,000 calories a day for an adult. 1,000. You spend that sleeping. A working man needs 2,500. A breastfeeding mother, 3,000. The math didn't add up, and that was exactly the intention. Anna Schultz received her first ration cards in October 1939. It seemed reasonable. 200 g of bread a day, 50 grain of butter a week, an egg every 2 weeks, an egg every 2 weeks. But then the rules changed, and changed every week. The butter disappeared. The bread turned to a grey paste made with sawdust. Meat was only for soldiers and party officials. Milk was only for children under 3. Lel had just turned 4. The black market exploded instantly, and prices were outrageous. An egg cost a week's wages. 1 kilo of sugar, 2 months' work. Real. Butter. Sell your wedding ring, and maybe, just maybe, you'd get 200 g. Anna did what millions of mothers did. She stopped eating. It was that simple. All her rations went to Klaus and Liesl. She chewed paper to trick her stomach, drank hot water with leaves, any leaf, to feel something going down. In 6 months, she lost 25 kilos. Her hip bones cut through her skin. But hunger does terrible things to the human mind. First you stop thinking about sex, then hygiene, then dignity. In the end, there's only one thought: food, food, food. The brain literally shrinks. Vision darkens at the edges. You'd sell your soul for a crust of bread. And that's when the recipes of despair began. Nettle soup, burnt barley coffee, rotten potato bread mixed with sawdust. In the Netherlands, when absolutely everything ran out, people started eating tulip bulbs. Yes, tulips boiled, roasted, ground into flour. Children developed a condition called hunger belly. The stomach swelled grotesquely while the rest of the body disappeared. Hospitals coined a new medical term, alimentary dystrophy. It was a fancy way of saying the body was devouring itself from within. In Leningrad, during the 900 days of siege, things reached a level of horror that defies comprehension. Carpenter's glue became dessert. Leather belts were boiled for hours to extract any protein. Birds, rats, cats, dogs, everything disappeared. And when there was nothing left, no more. Some things are too dark even to tell. Anna survived by doing something she swore to take to her grave. She worked cleaning the party offices. Sometimes she'd find crumbs, a forgotten piece of chocolate, scraps in the officer's trash. She ate them right there, hidden, her hands shaking with shame because if she took them home she'd have to share. and her children needed whole portions, not crumbs. The final statistic is devastating. More people died of starvation in world. Water too than from all weapons combined. Entire cities were decimated without a single shot. Food, or the lack thereof, was the true weapon of mass destruction. But hunger was only half the suffering equation, because when you're too weak to think, too vulnerable to react, that's exactly when you have to make the most impossible decisions of your life. And when you're too weak to think, too vulnerable to react, that's exactly when you have to make the most impossible decisions of your life. December 1942, temperature 2°C. Anna Schultz looked at her 2 sleeping children and did the same calculation all night. There were 4 potatoes left. Klaus needed strength. He'd been rooting for weeks, but Lisa was smaller, more fragile. Sharing equally meant they would both go hungry. Giving more to one meant watching the other waste away. She gave 3 to Klaus. To this day, she doesn't know if it was the right decision, but it was a simple choice compared to what other mothers faced. In Warsaw, when the Nazis created the ghetto, Jewish families had exactly 1 night to decide. Try to escape or move there. Fleeing meant abandoning sick grandparents. Staying meant trusting the rumors were exaggerated. 300,000 people chose to stay. It was the last choice many made. And then there were the split-second decisions, the sirens blaring, the bomb shelter overflowing. Room for 50, 100 people trying to get in. Who decides who lives? The strong man who pushes the pregnant woman? The mother who uses her body to protect her children's space? The shelter guard who accepts jewelry to let one more in? There's a story that haunts me to this day. Hamburg Children's Hospital, March 1943. Heavy bombing. Head nurse Ingrid had 20 doses of morphine and 60 burned children. The morphine would run out in an hour. The children would agonize for another 12. She chose the 20 most likely to survive. The other 40 died screaming. Ingrid could never work with children again, could never sleep without pills again. But that night she did the only thing possible. She chose to save those who could be saved. Doctors developed a macabre system called reverse triage. Unlike today, where the most serious cases are treated first, in wartime you saved those who consumed the fewest resources. A broken leg, top priority, returns to work quickly. An abdominal wound, last in line, uses a lot of medication and probably dies anyway. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the choices parents in the Warsaw Ghetto faced. When the deportations began, families discovered that children who worked were more likely to avoid being taken away. Suddenly, desperate parents were trying to get brutal jobs for their 10 and 11-year-old children. Rachel Goldstein falsified documents to say her son David was 14, not 11. She got him a job in a munitions factory, 12 hours a day, carrying heavy metal. His hands bled, his back was bent, but he survived 3 months longer than the children at school. 3 months was what cost him his childhood, and there were even darker choices. When a family was discovered in hiding, the Nazis made the entire family choose. Everyone dies or hand over one, just one. Parents staring at their children, siblings staring at each other. 30 seconds to decide. Can you imagine looking your child in the eye and saying, "You"? Some parents volunteered. Some older children stepped forward. Some families refused to choose and died together. Every decision was simultaneously right and wrong, heroic and cowardly, humane and inhumane. Anna Schultz had her own version of this hell. Klaus developed tuberculosis. The only medicine available was at the military hospital. The nurse said softly, "Bring something to trade, anything." Anna had only one thing of value, her false documents, which identified her as Aryan. Without them, she would be classified as 1/8 Jewish, a death sentence. She traded her safety for 10 vials of streptomycin. Klaus survived. Anna spent the rest of the war hiding, trembling with every knock on the door. It was worth it. She never knew how to respond. These impossible choices broke something fundamental in the human soul. After the war, the survivors carried a guilt that no therapy could heal. Why did I live and my brother didn't? Why did I choose to save my youngest son? Why wasn't it me? But amidst all this horror, something extraordinary began to happen. Human beings, even broken, even destroyed, began to do something that defied all logic. They adapted. And I'm not talking about just any adaptation. I'm talking about transforming trash into life, creating codes that saved entire families, inventing technologies out of absolutely nothing. If necessity is the mother of invention, World War II was a maternity ward on an industrial scale. It started with fuel. When gasoline ran out, someone in Warsaw discovered that you could ferment rotten potatoes and extract enough alcohol to power a car 15 kilometers. Within 2 weeks, the entire city was doing it. Distilleries sprang up in basements using old pots and pipes, rusty. But it was with hygiene that creativity exploded. Soap ran out in 1940. Anna Schutz learned from a Ukrainian neighbor. Wood ash mixed with animal fat. Any fat, even rat fat, created a paste that cleaned. It smelled terrible, but infection killed faster than bombing. Code saved lives daily. A white handkerchief in the window meant safe hiding for Jews. Red, Nazis in the area. Blue, food to trade. Housewives created a complex visual language that worked better than any clandestine radio. And the radios? Oh, that's a fascinating story. When the Nazis confiscated all the radios, a retired physics professor discovered he could build a receiver with a pencil, a razor blade, and copper wire stolen from telephone poles. The sound was awful, but it worked. The BBC in London broadcast codes disguised as weather forecasts. Heavy rain in Berlin meant heavy bombing was coming. Survival networks became works of art in social engineering. In every building there was one, a human alarm system. The lady on the first floor faked a coughing fit when she saw a uniform approaching. 3 coughs. Regular police, 5 coughs. Gestapo. Continuous cough, run now. Anna was part of one of these networks. Her official job was cleaning offices. Her real job was memorizing discarded documents, train schedules, deportation lists, guard changes. She couldn't read very well, but she memorized formats, numbers, any pattern. At night, she passed everything to a contact who appeared as a coal delivery man. Improvised medicine saved millions. Without antibiotics, people rediscovered that honey prevented infection. Chewed willow bark relieved pain, natural aspirin. Fermented urine turned into ammonia to clean wounds. Disgusting? Yes, surprisingly. But the most impressive adaptation was psychological. People developed war sleep, the ability to sleep deeply for 15 minutes and wake up fully alert. Mothers learned to breastfeed while running. Children played. In the rubble as if it were a backyard. Home, dark humor became essential. Jokes about Hitler, about death, about hunger. In Berlin, one was circulating. What's the difference between the sun and Hitler? The sun sets in the west. Laughter was resistance. It was proving they were still human. Children created macabre, but necessary games. Identifying the plane by sound became a competition. Whoever guessed whether the bomb fell near or far won the last bullet of the month. Klaus became so good at it that Anna called him a little radar. Document forgery became a refined art. A pharmacist discovered that pregnant women's urine could erase official ink without leaving a trace. A still-life artist became the greatest passport forger of the French resistance. He saved 8,000 lives. He was caught and executed, and most extraordinary of all, entire communities reorganized into survival cells. It didn't matter if you were communist, capitalist, Catholic, or Jewish. At the time of the bombing, everyone bled red. Historical. Enemies shared shelters. Priests hid communists. Communists saved priests. But all this adaptation, all this genius born of desperation exacted a price that would only be paid decades later when the mind finally processed what the body had endured. Because the human brain has a fascinating and terrifying defense mechanism. During trauma, it simply shuts down parts of itself like a blown fuse to protect the system. The problem is, these fuses don't repair themselves. Klaus, Anna's son, was diagnosed in 1965 with something doctors called survivor syndrome. At 30, a successful executive, he still slept under the bed. He still woke up at 4:45 a.m., the exact time the first sirens wailed. His body remembered even when his mind tried to forget, but Klaus was lucky. He could at least talk about it. 40% of survivors developed permanent mental disorders. 40%. And those are just the ones who were diagnosed. How many more suffered in silence, thinking that nightmares every night were normal, that jumping at loud noises was just nervousness? Children were the most affected in ways no one anticipated. An entire generation grew up without knowing what true silence was. Lel, at age 8, went into total panic when the war ended. Silence terrified her more than bombs. She banged pots and pans, turned on radios, anything to reproduce the safe noise of war. There were 6-year-olds who knew how to calculate a bomb's trajectory by sound, but couldn't tie their shoes. Teenagers who could sleep through explosions, but woke up screaming at birdsong. The world was upside down inside their minds. And then there was the case of the pianist. Let me tell you about Wilhelm Steinberg. Wilhelm was the most celebrated pianist in Vienna before the war. Hands that made Chopin look easy. When the bombings began, he did something no one understood. Every time the sirens wailed, instead of running for cover, he sat at the piano and played. Beethoven under bombs, Mozart amid explosions. The neighbors thought he had gone mad, until they realized. Children stopped crying when they heard the piano. Mothers stopped screaming. For a few minutes, the music was louder than the war. Wilhelm played through 1,200 nights of bombing. He saved the sanity of an entire city block. He physically survived. But when the war ended, Wilhelm could never play a note again. His hands, those magical hands, trembled uncontrollably whenever they approached a keyboard. The music had died inside him, sacrificed to keep others alive. The concept of normal simply vanished. Grown men urinated their pants when they heard commercial airplanes. Women hoarded food obsessively, hiding bread until it molded. Children played concentration camp as if they were tagging. Anna developed something we would now call severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. She counted everything, steps to work. Find 342 planks on the floor, 67 heartbeats before sleep. They had to be even numbers or she would start over. It was the only way her mind could find to pretend had control. Psychiatrists after the war were overwhelmed. But how do you treat an entire nation traumatized? How do you explain to someone who survived hell, who now needs to go back to worrying about normal things, paying bills, going to work, pretending? Life makes sense. Many couldn't. Suicide rates in the 5 years after the war were higher than during the conflict. Surviving the war was one thing, surviving peace was quite another. And most cruelly, society expected them to simply get over it. After all, the war was over, wasn't it? Why still wake up screaming? Why still hoard food? Why still distrust everyone? The trauma didn't end in 1945. It just changed form. It hid in the dark corners of the mind, waiting for a loud noise, a specific smell, a date on the calendar to return with full force. And that's exactly why we, in 2025, with all our technology and comforts, would be utterly destroyed. Let me give you a reality check. Right now, as you watch this, your phone probably has less 50% battery, and you're already anxious. The internet went down for 2 hours last week, and you nearly had a nervous breakdown. The air conditioning broke, and you slept poorly one night. One night, they slept poorly for 2,200 consecutive nights. Let's do a quick test. Can you make a fire without matches or a lighter? Find drinking water without turning on a tap. Identify which plants in your region are edible. Calculate how many calories you need to survive a week. No. Then you'd die in the first few days. Our dependence is pathetic. Anna Schultz made soap with ashes. You panic if your favorite shampoo is out of stock at the store. Klaus could identify planes by their sound from 2 miles away. You can't sleep if your neighbor is playing low music. Think about it. All your food comes from a supermarket that receives just-in-time deliveries, 3 days without trucks, and the shelves are empty. Your water relies on electricity to be pumped. Your money exists only on digital servers. You literally own nothing real other than what's in your house right now, and don't even get me started on skills. Practical, sewing, repairing, preserving food. Your voice could do all this in its sleep. You throw away a pair. Serve pants if the zipper breaks. Throw away food because it's a day past its expiration date. Call a technician to change a light bulb. The World War II generation survived on 1,000 calories a day, doing heavy physical labor. You complain of hunger, if delivery takes 40 minutes. They walked 20 kilometers in the snow to get 50 kilos of potatoes. You cancel the order if the delivery fee exceeds $5. But the worst part isn't even the physical fragility, it's the mental one. Anxiety because the story didn't get enough likes. Depression because your crush didn't respond within 2 hours. Panic because the Wi-Fi is slow. Now imagine real anxiety. Your child could starve to death tomorrow. Real depression. You buried half your family. Real panic. That noise means you have 90 seconds to hide or die. We've created a generation that has panic attacks during college exams, but they performed surgery without anesthesia. That freaks out over criticism on Twitter, but they were tortured for fun, who can't go an hour without checking their cell phones, but they went months without hearing from relatives. The brutal truth: we are the most unprepared generation in human history for any real crisis. We have more information than all our ancestors combined and less practical skills than a 10-year-old in 1940. And you know what's most ironic? We think we're prepared because we have emergency kits from Amazon. 300-watt tactical flashlights we don't know how to use. Survival knives that have never cut through anything but packaging. Backpacks with enough gear to climb Everest. But we don't know how to light a fire. You think you'd survive because you've seen tutorials on YouTube, but do you know the difference between you and them? They had no choice. When your life literally depends on turning urine into medicine, you learn or you die. There are no replays, no save points, no second shifts. Our fragility is so extreme that a 3-day blackout would cause more deaths than a month of bombing in 1940, because at least they knew how to live. Without electricity, we will die staring at black screens, waiting for someone to come and save us. But here's the plot twist, which will change everything you think about this story. They weren't prepared either. No one was. Anna Schutz was a housewife who baked cakes on Sundays and embroidered pillowcases, not a trained survivalist. Wilhelm was a pianist with hands made for Chopin, not for carrying rubble. Klaus and Lel were just children who wanted to play hide and seek, not learn the difference between German and British bombers by sound. Do you know what the most common profession was before the war? Accountant, baker, seamstress, teacher. Normal. People who complained about the weather, gossiped about their neighbors, dreamed of vacations in the countryside just like you. The difference wasn't preparation, it was necessity. And when necessity knocks, human beings do something extraordinary. They transform. In 6 months, just 6 months, millions of ordinary people became survival experts. Not because they took courses, not because they read books, but because the alternative was death. And the brain humans, when truly pressed, are the most powerful. Adaptation machines in existence. The numbers don't lie. 90% of the urban population had never planted anything. In 2 years, urban gardens produced 40% of the city's food. 80% didn't know how to apply first aid. At the end of the war, 12-year-old children were suturing wounds. But what truly saved them wasn't knowledge. It was something we lost: community. When the bombs fell, it wasn't every man for himself. It was the lady in apartment 3 caring for the orphans in apartment 7, the baker sharing the last sack of flour with the entire street, the retired doctor teaching everyone how to treat wounds, the mechanic showing how to make a stove out of tin cans. They survived because when civilization collapsed, they built another, smaller, simpler, but more humane. There was no government telling them what to do. There was no instruction manual. There were only people understanding a fundamental truth. We either save ourselves together or we die alone. And herein lies the true lesson no one wants to hear. We would be capable of the same. Yes, you who are there thinking you would die on the first day when the water ran out, you would learn to purify. When the food disappeared, you would figure out what to eat. When danger arrived, you would protect those you loved with a ferocity you didn't even know you had. Because deep down, in our DNA, we are the descendants of survivors. Each of us exists because our ancestors survived plagues, wars, famines, disasters. Resilience isn't something we learn. It's something we rediscover when we need it. The problem is, we forget it. We've created a society so safe, so comfortable, that we forget the survivor animal that lives inside each of us. But it's there sleeping, waiting, Anna Schultz died in 1998 at the age of 82. In her final days, she called her granddaughter and said something that should be etched in stone. "I wasn't strong, I wasn't special. I just had the option to give up. And I discovered that when you don't have that option, you endure things you never imagined. Today you woke up without sirens, without hungry, without fear, with clean water coming from the tap and food waiting in the fridge, with the freedom to complain about small things and dream about big things. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you lucky, absurdly, unbelievably lucky. If tomorrow the sirens sounded, if the world you knew fell apart, you would discover the same truth that Anna, Wilhelm, Klaus, and millions of others have discovered. Inside you is a survivor waiting, not because you are special, but because you are human. And in the end, that was always enough. World War II wasn't about heroes and villains. It was about ordinary people doing impossible things, because it was that or die. And they chose to live, even when living in hell. This is the real story, not of how you wouldn't survive, but of how, against all odds, you probably would. Because when we take away comfort, technology, distractions, there is only one thing left: the absurd, irrational, magnificent human will to continue. Look, I know you must be out there processing all of this, maybe with a lump in your throat, maybe thinking about your grandmother, your grandfather, or simply grateful to be alive in 2025. If this story moved you the same way it moved me when I discovered these stories, do a favor for whoever needs to hear this. Send it to the family group. Share it with that friend who keeps complaining about everything, because sometimes we need a story like that to wake up, you know? And if you've made it this far, damn, it's almost 20 minutes of pure horror and overcoming. It's because you're different. You are not one of those who click on any sensationalist news. You want to truly understand how the world works. It's for people like you that I spend hours researching, writing, recording. By the way, do you see this video appearing on the screen? It's about what life was like in the Middle Ages. And bro, if you thought World War II was brutal, wait until you find out what they did to criminals back then. There's a specific story about a baker that will make you rethink your entire view of justice. And hey, if you haven't signed up yet, which is it, right? Have you watched this far, enjoyed the content, and left without leaving a like? It's explained. Why Anna Schultz survived and you wouldn't survive. She reciprocated when she received help. Just kidding. But seriously, every week I bring stories like this, real deep, that make you think. It's not clickbait, it's not forced drama. It's pure and raw history. If that's what you're looking for on YouTube, you've found your channel. Comment below what story about your family, about war you know. Did your grandfather fight? Did your grandmother survive any conflict? These stories cannot die with them. Now go, click on the Middle Ages video. You won't regret it, or will. But then at least we can suffer together until next week. If the world doesn't end by then. M.